Since 2003, I've been privileged to be the host and reporter for New York One's weekly profile series, One-on-One. I've found that many of the more than 200 influential and intriguing New Yorkers we've profiled are shy, quiet, unwilling to offer an opinion, and above all, love all people. Then you have these guys. I say these guys with the utmost love and respect because at their core, Anthony Bourdain and David Chang are guys with whom you'd want to have a cup of coffee, a drink, a meal. In Chang's case, what else in his famed pork buns? In Bourdain's case, perhaps a nice helping of sheep testicles. Tonight's standing room only crowd is testament to the passionate reaction they've elicited in the food world. Anthony Bourdain worked in kitchens and restaurants for almost 30 years. He is the author of several books, as you know, including the best-selling book that started this remarkable journey, Kitchen Confidential, Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly, and this year's Medium Raw, A Bloody Valentine to the World of Food and the People Who Cook. His show on the Travel Channel, No Reservations, just celebrated the 100th episode, and it won an Emmy Award in 2009 for cinematography. When I told people in the newsroom earlier this year that I was interviewing David Chang, a certain look came over them. It was a happy look, a look that evoked something that was sacred in my house growing up, memories of a great meal. Since the first Momofuku restaurant opened, he's won 3 James Beard Foundation Awards, been named a Time 100, GQ Man of the Year, Crain's New York 25 People to Watch, and called one of the most influential people of the 21st century by Esquire. There's Momofuku Noodle Bar, Sambar, Ko, and Milk Bar. I don't believe that the success of his new restaurant, Ma Pesh, is related to the fact that my mother's name in Yiddish is actually Pesh. But as they say in the restaurant biz, it couldn't hurt. Please welcome the Mick and Keith of the food world. 2 great storytellers and 2 New York guys, Anthony Bourdain and David Chang. Mick and Keith, are you okay with Mick and Keith? Is that good?
I don't want to be Mick.
I think David was actually going to be Mick. Welcome. Thanks for being here at the 92nd Street Y. When was the first time you 2 met?
It's a blur.
It's a blur.
I don't remember it.
I remember cooking for Anthony, but I never went to say hello.
When did you cook for him?
3.5 years ago?
Yeah, it was my birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You came in with your wife.
My wife brought me to Momofuku Sam for my birthday, and I sat at the bar and had one of those holy shit meals. and it really was. It was the frise salad with the chicharron and that amazing tripe stew underneath. That really, it was like really a good slap in the face. It was, wow, something really special's going on here. I got to meet this guy.
Yeah, and you know he's in the building when you're cooking for him.
There's 2 entrances, so I remember running down through the back because I wanted to see what he was how he was eating, and but I didn't want to go and disturb him, so I was peeking through the corner.
Yeah, and how did he eat?
I mean, everything was coming back clean, so that's all that mattered to me. So.
You should know, by the way, that we have the same agent, and she called me today and said, "Don't let David get into trouble today." I was like, "You're asking me?"
How is that possible? Trouble?
I'm the good one.
So, I mean, I joke about the Mick and Keith thing, but this notion of the rock star chef is a phrase now that we're not shocked by anymore. When did you start to notice something's going on here that, be it through the restaurants or be it through the books and the television show, that people are really paying a lot more attention to this.
For me, it was somebody came into my kitchen a long time ago with a copy of White Heat, Marco Pierre White, and that was an electrifying moment. You know, here we were slogging away in a profession that was that we were all in because it would have us. There was no chance or hope of any kind of prestige. Nobody really cared what the chef thought. The prototype of the chef, the star chef, was a fat French guy. There was no one to look to as being like us at all. And here suddenly there's this book with these pictures of gorgeous, beautiful, very French food. This drawn, scraggly-haired guy smoking in the kitchen. And all of us, it was an electrifying event because we looked at this picture of this guy who'd just gotten 3 Michelin stars, and we all said, this guy looks like us. You know, there's hope for us. You know, someone might someday give a shit what we think now. So for me, that was it.
And no one's made a cookbook quite like White Heat since.
No.
Although your cookbook is pretty great, and it's a lot more than just what we might think of as a traditional cookbook. As you're getting started, is there any inclination that if we survive the bankruptcies, if we survive, as you once told me, the stairs at the original noodle bar, you know, putting your foot through it, we got something here. People will come.
We just wanted to stay in business. Now, we were able to be very, I would say, reckless in terms of our decisions. Not really worrying what the customer thought, doing what we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And because like if we were going to go out of business, then we might as well have fun while we're going to do it.
Right.
That approach doesn't work quite so well now. Like we have well over 400 employees now. So what was really a 1-2 person show has now grown to this, massive organism almost.
So going into Mapesh, do you know, hey, that world when we first opened up the first one and maybe even the second one, that's gone. There's no way we can replicate that. It's
more difficult to think in that mode now because I don't have a child. Tony does, but I imagine that it would be somewhat like a kid. You know, I have a rebellious teenager, I have a toddler, I have a newborn.
Which is which?
I haven't figured that out yet.
Well, Kennedy, JFK said about children, when you have a child, you give fate a hostage. And I'm just thinking now, it's like that with the restaurant business. I want to come back to your question about this whole, the celebrity chef thing, though, because Marco was important for another reason. Because not only did we see his picture, which was a big deal for all of us, but we heard about this guy who was throwing everybody out of his restaurant. I mean, the legend was he threw 75 people out of his restaurant in one night. Here was a chef who could walk out into the dining room. Of course, this is every chef's dream, right? Who ordered the well-done steak? Okay, you out. What are you looking at? And then it was like, you don't like it, you can go. Oh, you don't like it either? You can go too. And in fact, I don't know that he ever, in fact, kicked 75 people out, but he was rather famous for, if he didn't like you, you asked for something stupid, the waiter would come over and start stripping the table. You were left with a naked table. Like, even the tablecloth would be removed. This was a tectonic shift all in and of itself, because up until that point, the customer was always right. So for all the bullshit that comes along with this celebrity chef phenomenon, it is bullshit. No one knows this more than chefs. We always knew who we were. We're the same people we were before. Okay, people like us now. But what it did mean is that suddenly, for whatever reason, regardless of whether it was right or wrong, people cared what the chef thought. And what that means at the end of the day is that chefs are able to create menus representing what they love themselves and what they would like to eat. And that was just not the case before.
What it's also meant for you is being able to travel the world and be in all these situations.
Yeah, but that wasn't because of my cooking. I wrote a book, and that was a
But because people care about it, you've been able to travel far and wide from Leonia, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so my question is, you just celebrated the 100th show. You're in Paris, and do you think you're a different guy when you're dealing with, for example, the chefs there and your friend and other guys that you really look up to? Do you think the show takes on a different tone in that setting as compared to, I'm going to some really exotic place, I'm going to try something that no one's ever tried before?
I respect anybody who works hard and who works hard in a restaurant. Okay, I'm already there on the side of the angels as far as I'm concerned. But you can be sure if I find myself sitting across the table from Joel Robuchon, bladder control is an issue. And I'll tell you, one of the really amazing things to me about this recent trip to Paris and how things have changed, how far we've come, how the world has tilted, is the name that kept coming up. All these young French chefs, the name that kept coming up, influence, you know, how come you're cooking the way you're cooking these days? You know, this very cool, you know, the fact that you've turned your back on the star system, you're running these sort of casual prefix, I don't give a fuck menus, and you know, where's this come from? Name that kept coming up, David Chang. And that, you know, to hear that out of a Frenchman's mouth in Paris, pretty awesome. We like this man, David Chang.
I'm just curious, one last thing on that, I'm just curious how the bladder control thing didn't make it into the show. That's something I respect.
Yeah, usually, you know, we leap at anything resembling a dick joke, but I managed, yeah, shit.
All right. Now we're getting somewhere. David, you told me when I interviewed you earlier this year that there were a couple times you guys came close to bankruptcy early on. And so paint a picture for us. You said your office was running underneath the bathroom in the first place.
The first restaurant, which is now Co., it was a little less than 600 square feet. The whole concept of having an open kitchen, I prefer a closed kitchen at the time, but everyone was like, oh, we love the minimalist decor, we love the fact that you have an open kitchen. It was the fact that we had no budget to open the restaurant. We
That's
had
pretty
nothing.
minimalist.
So we made do with what we had, but I think one of the struggles, having a restaurant in the East Village or in New York, and you know, being in old buildings, and it's always a fight against space, against leaks, against electricity or outage. Having a restaurant in New York is very difficult. You're really fighting the building to support a restaurant, and at that time, the first 6, 7 months, we had no idea how to run a restaurant. We were just trying to figure out how to cook. I mean, really, trying to operate a cash register. Running a business versus just cooking on the line are, you know, completely different things, obviously, but something that I didn't think of at the time.
I remember you telling me that your friends would come down, not to support you necessarily, but because...
It was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about cooks, and I was just recently with a lot of top chefs in Finland, and everyone agreed on this. Everyone loves to cook. That's why they got into the profession. But the biggest reason, and arguably the number one reason what kept them in cooking, was your ability to make fun of each other, to talk shit. That's what you do all day long. I don't think people realize this in kitchens. Yes, there's a lot of serious stuff going on, mise en place, but there's some funny stuff.
No, you think they're laughing it up at Charlie Trotter right now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not a fun restaurant.
When you wrote Kitchen Confidential, did you think, all right, this notion of showing it as I'm going to show it, there's something here. It's going to catch people's fancy, or I'm just writing this book?
Listen, I really, my highest hope was that I was terrified that other cooks would think it was bullshit. Okay, so if I envisioned a reader, if I was sensitive to, if I had all considered that anyone at all would read it. It was that my fry cook would read it and say, "Oh, dude, that's bullshit." So I wrote a book for him in a lot of ways, and for other fry cooks in the New York tri-state area. But the notion that anyone outside of that small, dysfunctional circle would read the book, it's a very New York-centric book. The whole damn Fish on Monday thing, it's gonna be in my fucking headstone. I'm getting calls from Japan a few months later, what's the matter with a Fish on Monday? And I don't know, I really never considered that anyone outside of New York would read it. My highest hope in moments of alcohol-fueled hubris was that maybe I'll sell, if I sell 10,000 copies, maybe, and I thought I was really hosing myself saying that. But then maybe when my knees go and it's all over and I can't even work brunch anymore, I might land some kind of writing gig again at some point. I don't want it to be a total, horrible, disreputable failure. That was really my highest hope. I wanted it to be true and amusing to people in the business in New York, and at least put up just enough numbers to maybe have a chance to write again when it all turned to shit.
But every cook read it. At that time when it came out, everyone was like, "Have you read that book? Have you read that book?" Or it was like,
When it came out, were you still at Trinity, or were you in Japan, or were you back here already?
I remember I had not read the book, but somebody was cooking, and they were like, "I think you're in Kitchen and Confidential. There's a part where you talk about the heat and how terrible it is in the kitchen." And somebody was saying like, "I love this. This is exactly what I want to do." And I can't remember exactly when, but that cookbook, particularly the end, that it really does capture a moment in time in New York City cooking. And those rules that you have at the end, those are universal. Show up on time, don't lie. These are very important things for every cook to this day. So,
talk about what you always wanted to do. Your father was in the restaurant business, and so can you tell us about the phone call to him, or maybe conversation, when you finally say to him, "This is what I want to do," and his reaction?
Well, I wanted to do it in high school, and he was in the restaurant industry by default because it was his first job when he came to New York as an immigrant, and he worked in it almost 30 years. So and his kids would never have to work in the restaurant business, because I don't know how, actually now because of TV and everything, but to this restaurant and the work behind it is backbreaking labor. It's gruesome, it's hard, and it's not glamorous at all. And he basically tried his best to persuade me never to enter a kitchen. Because I remember telling him as a 16, 17-year-old. And I remember I was at Sam and Harry's Steakhouse in Washington, D.C. I went in for an interview, and they sat me next to the broiler. But you never have an interview next to the broiler. And I was like, wow, this is incredibly hot. I don't know if maybe my dad's right. I cannot do this. They wanted me to be a busboy, a waiter, to stay away from the kitchen. So eventually, I think he just saw that I was passionate about it, and I wanted to take it as far as I could.
And the story is pretty well known for people that know your story about when they came in for the first time and you didn't comp them. They paid. First of all, you talked about when... I think that's admirable.
No, the legend is that it took a year for them to get in a co. Right?
It's true. That is also true. They miss friends and family. I felt that as someone that was becoming not a role model, but someone that was like leading people, that you couldn't undermine them, you couldn't take from them, and you couldn't provide special privileges for yourself. So I felt that, and also if your business or restaurant is filled with just friends and family, you're going to go out of business.
Right.
So,
You monster.
yeah. I don't know. I just felt that, you know what? No special treatment. You're just like everyone else.
Right.
As much as I love you, Mom and Dad, thanks for the support.
Anthony, can you tell us about when you were growing up, and you would go to France on like family vacations?
There was like a 3-year period, really early on, where I'd go to France. Generally, we'd see relatives, distant relatives, in Normandy for a week, Paris for a few days, and then spend the bulk of the vacation, with my father's aunt in the southwest of France, a little oyster village. I mean, it was not a year in Provence by any means. It was, it was an oyster village. All my, oyster fishing village, and all the neighbors were oyster fishermen, and I'd go out with them now and again. And at the time, I didn't come out of that experience saying I want to be a chef.
Right.
But I think that exposure to good butter, good cheese, oysters, good sausage, those things, seeing my father's face when he would, eat a little, saucisson à l'ail, and that clearly resonated later. It had nothing to do with why I got in the restaurant business.
Later, as you start traveling the world with the show, and because of the books, you wrote a couple of them down that we've talked about in the past. Sheep testicles, ant eggs, raw seal eyeball. And
whole seal,
I will say that in the 18 years of New York One, there's only one time that the phrase deer penis has been on the air.
Really? It's funny.
And you can guess which profile that was.
I was watching my own network, and I saw 2 other shows where they both went to the same restaurant and had the same deer penis. It's like it's so last week, It's, at this point.
So at this point, is it a case of, yeah, I'm still game to do whatever, although you have a couple of restrictions, or do you find that because of the reputation, now people are trying to outdo one another?
I don't know. Particularly in Asia, the show's really popular in like Singapore or Malaysia, Hong Kong, and what this leads to is if I find myself there, I walk into a restaurant, chances are the owners are fans, and they're like, oh, we just saw you eating deer penis last week. Have you tried uterus, So there's a can you top this tendency among restaurants that I go to. But that is a long, long time ago. There were a couple of, first of all, I decided, I'm no longer going to be in the business of freaking out, middle Americans by, eating weird stuff around the world. At some point, I'm away from home traveling over 200 days a year. A long time ago, the word weird or bizarre lost all meaning to me. I started to look at it from the other point of view. You stay in Asia long enough, you come back and you see somebody tucking into a Cinnabon or a bowl of cottage cheese, and you start thinking like a Thai would, that is just fucking disgusting. So on those grounds, I pretty much am out of that game. And then also there was an armadillo incident a while back where we often armadillo for a scene, and I just felt, this is totally unnecessary. Okay, people eat this here. But they don't eat it every day. This is not a beloved everyday staple of Argentinian cuisine. And I said, you know what? No more. Unless this is a central thing or a holiday thing or something that's an everyday, commonplace representative dish. I'm not going to do it. That's not what I do anymore.
Do you get any pressure to do it? In other words, one of the other things I love about the book, and especially the show, is the whole notion of food and culture mixed together, and how you incorporate those two and tell us about the culture of a particular place. The more exotic, the more interesting, and how the food relates to it. Is that for you? Is that a conscious decision early on? This is something I'm interested in, I'm going to put it in, or was it a suggestion from someone?
No, it's an inescapable truth that food is the fastest way into a culture. It's the story of the culture. People are telling you something when they feed you. We learned long ago that there's just about no place in the world that if your only agenda is to sit down, have some drinks with people, and eat, you can pretty much get along with anybody. You can be welcome anywhere, and it gives you access to a culture that you probably never would have had. As far as pressure, I don't get pressure from anybody, honestly. If a particular show sucks, it's my fault. Mm-hmm. Nobody at the network is saying, we need more barbecue shows. I know they like more barbecue shows, but they're not getting them, and they don't dare ask. I will say, just as a matter of fact, that I have as much freedom to go anywhere I want, make television any way I want, shoot it the way I want, score it the way I want, as anyone in the history of television has ever had. I mean, we have literally no restraints on,
It's true.
They don't want me to use the word felching again on TV. But other than that, it's pretty much open road.
No,
Your response?
He does. I was at, they were like, I don't know the TV terminology, but they were getting ready this Christmas special, and I was just like, what is going on here? They were like, Tony wants to do it this way. And I guess
it's an extremely disturbing generic holiday special that we have coming up that David's on, and he it's actually really funny because you go, you're shopping, right? There's this scene of him shopping in the morning for this scene. You were not at your best that morning.
Probably not, no.
Oh, it's awesome.
Maybe because it was in the morning.
Lost in the supermarket.
Yes.
When I talked to you earlier this year, you had dealt with, one of the things that comes through in your writing and in talking to both of you is that after all the joking, after all the talk about this place and this society right now, this is hard work. And the restaurant business, no harder business than the restaurant business. You've had migraines, you've had shingles over the last couple of years, and when I talked to you earlier this year, you're talking about, I'm still passionate about it, but kind of have to find a way to, make sure my health is okay. How is your health, and is it difficult to find that medium ground when you're passionate about what you do, you love what you do, it's going well, but you can't envelop your whole life?
Things are continuing to change. I remember Tony's first episode, and they were documenting you, and you had just finished your U.S. book tour, and you were sort of shell-shocked, what the hell is going on? This is still happening. And that's sort of how I feel, and to this day, even though I'm still further removed from the kitchen, I'm still in the kitchen, but I'm not cooking. Mm-hmm. And that's why I got into this whole business to begin with. Never to think that I'd be sitting in front of all you guys next to you. It's just crazy. That's how I judge myself still. That's what I love most about being a cook is you could write your mise en place list and everything you just scratch off. And then you cook service, and you have a good service. Then you go out and have some drinks, and then you go to bed, repeat. That was your day. And you just get programmed. And once you start to not have that ritual, things get really hazy.
This is the curse of the cook, actually, because it's been 10 years since I cooked. But I still, in much the same way as David, anyone who's cooked for any period of time, especially when you start young, you judge yourself always by how you felt at the end of a shift cooking. When you cook with your hands, with someone on your right, someone on your left, everybody looking at you, your chef yelling at you. It was a true meritocracy. It was you were really putting up, victory or failure. These were quantifiable notions. You knew how well you did on a minute-by-minute basis, on a day-by-day basis. So even now, 10 years later, I shouldn't be judging myself by a cook's standards, but after 28 years, you know, I guess, you know, any shame, self-loathing, or discomfort, or guilt, or whatever, or anger I feel, I think a lot of that is based on the fact that you know, what I do now doesn't feel like work. You know,
Exactly,
it just does not feel like, you know, I don't go home at the end of the day after a really good writing day. I don't go home feeling like a fucking titan. I feel like a needy, neurotic writer. You know,
So is
who
that
likes them?
So is that a kind of a difficult thing to explain to even to the people who are close to you? This notion that there's been success, great success, and yet you won't, as you write, won't ever again, in your case, feel that feeling of working the shift day after day and that drink with everybody once the day is done. That will still stand on its own.
I mean, I'm sentimental about it, but I mean, I don't delude myself that, you know, gee, I could always, no, I'm still good. I could go back in. I can't. You know, there's no way I'm going to go back on the line. I wouldn't like it. It wouldn't feel good. I wouldn't be good at it. But you know, I guess your value system is the value system you live by is sort of pounded in early, and that stays with you.
Scars stay with you too?
Oh no, they were soft and lovely.
You still have Beth, you told me once that you have Beth Israel on speed dial.
Oh, I knew that. I mean, I know how to navigate those doors and always very, very well.
See, I'd always take my cooks to St. Vincent. It's much better, cleaner, faster service, fewer head injuries.
I remember one time somebody stabbed himself with an oyster knife, and we're walking towards Beth Israel because it's only like 8 blocks away, and I'm yelling at him while he's bleeding. I'm like, why did you do it this way? Why did you do it this way?
Good times, huh?
Yeah, it was a good time. I can reminisce. Sounds like a good time. It was terrible. I was like, retrospect, I'm sure to cook now. It's not very fun.
I miss it.
Now I come to probably the most important question of the evening because I have a 7-year-old at home. And Tony, it's to you, and that is, can you indeed confirm that Ronald McDonald has cooties?
Allegedly. He has allegedly been implicated in the disappearance of a number of small children.
And how is that working? You have a young child. How's that working at home?
She doesn't know Ronald exists yet.
Yeah.
But, you know, once you know, it will happen. The day will come up, and she's going to come, well, you know, Vanessa brought me to, you know, she had these wonderful French fries, and I'm going to, I need to be prepared.
The cooties defense.
Just how hard is it to scare the living shit out of a 3-year-old? I just don't think the Michael Pollan argument works. That's all I'm saying. I don't think a kid, you know, what about the environment? It's not sustainable, you know. They don't care. You know. Kids do crystal meth. They're sure as hell gonna do Ronald McDonald, you know. So I have a new strategy. I didn't use this in the book. You know, actually, the original draft of the book I was talking about. I think dipping steel wool in chocolate and leaving it in a McDonald's wrapper for your daughter to find. You know, for an early traumatic Ronald McDonald experience. You know, and my publisher called up and said, you know, this is bordering on child abuse. So I have a new one. This is what you do. Your child's favorite Barbie, you cut the head off, dip it in chocolate, put it in the McDonald's wrapper, leave it there and say, you know, Daddy's going out for a few minutes. Whatever you do, don't eat the delicious McDonald's chocolate over there. Is that wrong? Come on, it's a children's health we're talking about here, the future of our country.
I thought we had an agreement that I would handle the feel-good portion of the program.
It's important to me, you know.
Not so much.
I just, you know, is Eric Schlosser convincing, you know, Hunter and Vanessa to stay away from McDonald's? I don't think so.
I'm always intrigued by, of course, what goes into the success and the passion that you guys have for what you do is interesting, but the journey to get there in any job, in any story, to me is just as, if not more compelling. David, when you came out of school and you were working in a financial job for a year or two, not even that long,
Yeah.
You want to paint that picture for us, what that was like for you?
I made sure I burned bridges so I could never go back. It's a short term.
So
short term.
day one, are you sitting there like, what am I doing
This
here?
this is awful, and I can't. I was like, what am I doing sitting at a desk staring at a computer? You know that the movie Office Space, when the guy was like, well, I do about 15 minutes of work all week long. I think I did like 10.
Yeah?
So
You saw that and you thought, that's a lot of work, 15 minutes. Yeah?
So I just thought that there was a big difference. I think that, when I started to cook, and it wasn't that long ago, but we saw the last generation of very serious cooks. And it was also the last time where kitchens in New York City, where if you wanted to work, if you wanted to learn how to cook, New York was the only place you could learn. And it was also the only place where if you did want to learn, you were working 90, 100-hour weeks and getting $300 paychecks. That doesn't happen anymore. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, some ways, weird way, I romanticize about that era because it was, I think maybe that was the glory days, the Halcyon. There's better restaurants back then, but, and I wanted to be part of that atmosphere.
When you went off to Japan, you were teaching English in the school?
I did.
And then you started going to the noodle shops, and then you started working there?
No. That was my first introduction to ramen. I mean, I had been introduced to it before, obviously, in America, but it was the first time where there was a gyoza store, a ramen shop, and a little supermarket, and that was it. So almost every night, I would eat at the ramen house. And I never had the courage to basically ask him, how are you making this amazingly delicious soup? And I was there for a short period, came back, and I didn't know what to do, so I was like, let me just go to cooking school. If I knew at the time, I think cooking school is important and all that, but I think if you're passionate about it, and you knock on the door of some restaurant that you want, and just tell them, I will work for free, I will do whatever you ask, you're gonna learn so much. And I don't know, my career could have been completely different had I just gone to, say, like, any great chef in New York or Paris or wherever, and just been like, that's what people want in the industry. People want people that are crazy, passionate about food, and I feel that's what gets me excited, and that's what I wanted to be a part of.
The notion of traveling around the world and going to different places, you've also been to some places where it's not just, hey, we're having a great time and eating new food or food I've never eaten before and going to bring it back. We got great footage. You were in Beirut a couple of years ago, and you were in Cambodia more than a couple of years ago. In situations, I would imagine that we're not in Kansas anymore. How many times have you been in situations where you thought, this is getting into a dangerous area?
I guess when you've got an American passport, there's a sense of arrogance that comes along with that. Mm-hmm. I don't think I was ever, during this 2006 thing in Beirut, I don't think I was ever frightened. I was frightened of losing contact with loved ones who were worried about me. But I always had this arrogant American, little secret voice saying, well, I'm American. They're not going to drop bombs on me. It'll be an international incident. I get killed. And not because I'm on TV. It just, it's like, a little white girl gets kidnapped. It's blowing everything off. It's a disproportionate, big news story. And in much the same way. So, I benefit from that weird, distorted value system to the point that, there have been times, there have been times where I've been frightened in Cambodia, roadblocks, things like that. But if anything, we just finished 100 episodes and we're looking at next season. And we're thinking, what do we do now? The travel show format is so rigid. No matter how much we try to mess with it, and we've done everything we can to subvert it, mess with it, stick a thumb in the eye of our greatest fans. I hate commercial breaks. I hate the fact that, you just, everything about the travel show requires you to lie. Every time you say, we'll be right back. every time you end an act, every time you say, next we're off to a meal that you probably shot yesterday. So we tried to, every time you sum up, those are also artificial. So we've really, really tried hard to find ways to stay interested, meaning me and the small crew who I work with. And what we're looking at now is, we think, because it's, we think we're pretty good at what we do. We've been to a lot of places. Maybe we're getting a little comfy. We've had a lot of great meals, a lot of great adventures. We're going to do some really difficult things next year. So we're going to be shooting in the Congo, Cuba, Haiti. We're looking at Kurdistan. And a lot of this emanates from the fact that in some of the harder countries we shot in, lately, Liberia, Hezbollah-controlled parts of Lebanon, Kerala, we were there at a bad time. We've been working with these really interesting security guys. They're not armed, they're consultants. They're all ex-SAS guys, deep thinkers, not knuckle draggers. They read poetry, they're really interesting. They're all about sort of reading the situation on the ground, restaurant tips in Kabul. They've gotten us thinking about, hey, a lot of the places that we thought we could never shoot in, we think we can do it. So we're going to be looking to shoot in some kind of dangerous places next year, or uncomfortable places, moral gray areas, where you're forced to re-examine things that you thought to be true.
And one of the things I thought is interesting in the latest book, Medium Raw, is that the juxtaposition of subjects. For example, you have a chapter late in the book called My Aim is True, about a guy who works at La Bernardine and cuts fish.
Have you met this guy, by the way?
No, but
You gotta go look at him.
it's a great description of a really good fish butcher, and
You would totally love watching this guy work. This
I
would
wanna.
make
What's his
you
name?
be so happy. His name is Justo Thomas, and he's I forget his age, but he's been working for about 7 years at Le Bernardin in a tiny little space in the cellar. It's his world. It's set up just the way he likes it. And he butchers between 700 and 1,000 pounds of fish on the bone. It arrives, the entire fish, unscaled, in many cases guts in, 700 to 1,000 pounds. He sets his own hours. He's basically like a prince at Le Bernardin. He's so good. What's great about the restaurant business is it's the last meritocracy. And there's a guy who has, to kind of quote Emerson, made his own world.
Right.
He shows up, cuts the fish, goes home when he's done. And he's done 4 hours after he starts. When he takes his vacation, it takes 3 experienced sous chefs working together all day long, and sometimes as late as till 10 o'clock at night to do the same job. And it is an amazing thing to see this man come in, very happy in his work, very well paid, very well looked after, who's created his own little empire in a small tiled room in the cellar of Le Bernardin, the best, seafood restaurant in the country.
What's good?
he was telling me. I remember you telling me, was it his the skate knife that he wanted it to be dull, and you were like, "Hey, this knife's a little dull," and he was like, "That's for."
He has special knives of different. He doesn't want knives that are too sharp for some tasks. He never touches meat, ever. He hates meat because he thinks it'll contaminate the fish. He lines the walls with plastic wrap like a serial killer. And no move, not one move is wasted. Everything has been figured out in advance. He's so organized and so serious and so happy to be working there. And it is this weird, idyllic restaurant situation, unlike anything I've ever worked in. Everybody calls him chef, and he calls everyone else chef. He's an incredible man doing an incredible job in an incredible restaurant.
And it's a wonderful chapter in the book, and it's written really eloquently. And a couple of chapters before that, we have the chapter, Alan Richman is a, sorry, I'm not seeing.
I think the word is douchebag. No. That's D-O-U-C-H-E-B-A-G.
You see,
douchebag.
All right.
And thank you for providing me the opportunity to revisit that.
Well, thank you for the explanation, because I'm not in the restaurant business, so I might not get that. My question is, there seems like there might be a push and pull here about topics that you write about. Is there something is it a decision that you have to make? I'm going to write this kind of stuff. It's really compelling and the kind of, like My Aim is True, or about culture and history, and then I'm going to write some snarky stuff too.
No, I don't even write an outline. I mean, I was able to write Kitchen Confidential because I had no time to write it, because I had no time to think about what I was going to write or what people might think. I wake up when it's time to write. I wake up, like I did when I was a dishwasher. I show up on time every day. In this case, 5 o'clock in the morning. I wake up. I write something that's interesting to me for as long as I can. Then I stop. Then I think about it for the rest of the day. I wake up the next day and I do it. I'd love to tell you that I'm really honing my craft, or that I've been, I agonize over sentences. I mean, clearly I don't. I mean, I write like I talk, and whatever's pissing me off that day, or that I'm excited about, or stuff I've been storing up. It's not. There's no. There's very little. There's nothing calculated about it.
Mm-hmm. David, you once told me that when it comes to kitchens, praise is the absence of criticism. Yeah. And that's a basic motto. And you likened it to the home that you grew up in. So can you make that line for us? What the connection is there between the home you grew up in, that environment, a loving one, and the environment that you've experienced working in restaurants?
Well, at home, it was, I guess, I don't want to stereotype all Asian Americans, but particularly Koreans, I can say that, it was never good enough. A pat on the back or, failure never deemed as good. Or if you got a B, that was never deemed as a good thing. Mm-hmm. Later in life, it was like, oh, Dave, you got a B. Thank God you didn't get a C, but you passed. But my household, it's just the culture. It doesn't reward, it doesn't pat you on the back for just being satisfactory. And in the kitchen, I was yelled at all the time. And sometimes that's a good thing, because the chef is sort of taking this person under their wing and really wants them to learn, or you keep on screwing up. For me, I think it was 50-50 on that. Mm-hmm. But the really, the ninjas in the kitchen are guys that, like the fish butcher at Le Bourdain, you never see them. They're silent. They never do anything wrong. And you don't even know that they're there, because they're just a shadow. They're effortless. And the chef never has to yell at them, never has to worry about their integrity or their mise en place that they're creating. Mm-hmm. And I was never one of those guys.
Me neither.
Tony talked a little bit about the trips to France and perhaps connection to food maybe then. You had a grandfather who was of Japanese descent, who you told me kind of preferred everything Japanese as far as food and so on and so forth.
I don't know if I didn't create it, but somebody said, hey, Koreans are the Jews of Asia. Because we've been colonized and enslaved, or it's just been a terrible history for Korean. There's nothing really proud to be like a Korean. That's terrible to say, but the one highlight in Korean history is like we created a turtle ship. That was pretty much it.
So what did you experience when you went to Japan?
Well, my grandfather at the time we were colonized by Japan, mm-hmm. and they took all the promising young males or women, and they basically indoctrinated them to basically be Japanese. My grandfather was more Japanese than he was Korean. And to the day he died, he preferred to eat Japanese food. So I had, a very interesting upbringing, because I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, and I didn't realize until after the fact that it was a lot of Japanese viewpoints. So.
And one last thing on this. When your folks did come in for that first meal, or maybe after that, is there a moment of, we got it. We got what you're trying to do. You've done well.
Yeah, recently, now they tell me to not work. Stop working so hard. That's the compliment I get from my dad.
We got questions. We have questions from the audience here, so let's get going. All right. What's your stance on genetically altered foods and their place in American culture?
I'm for them. I mean, I'm not automatically in a knee-jerk way. I mean, I don't want to trust gigantic, huge corporations with determining whether or not they're good for us. But it's like, the genie's out of the bottle. If you tell me that the technology exists to safely grow a super tomato that will feed India, okay, and hurt no one,
right,
and that can be proven to my satisfaction, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, it's not natural, I'm against it. We've been genetically modifying food since the settlers first arrived here and transformed this entire country. It wasn't like this. We're not living in, first growth forest, old growth forest anymore. So I'm not instinctively against it. Show me in a satisfactory way that you can do it safely and responsibly, which means not hunt down neighboring farmers and prosecute them if, seeds drift over, right, that sort of thing. I mean, it comes with a lot of problems. But in and of itself, the idea of genetically modifying food so that more people can avoid starvation, I'm not against that, okay? But color me wary and cautious.
Anybody whose opinion on food along those lines you've ever disagreed with, who has spoken to you and said, here's my point, and here's why I have this point of view, and you've thought about it afterwards and thought, that's a good point. I may change.
Who would that be?
I don't know. That's the question.
I don't know. A little off topic. Did you? No, I'm sorry to do this to you, but did you see Vanity Fair, the picture of Alice Waters' kitchen?
No.
Oh, it's so awesome.
Don't do this to me, man.
Oh, I highly recommend looking at this. So it's like, you're telling me I should be like working on a farm right now, and that's your kitchen? No. It's awesome.
I'll take that as a no. Okay, last meal, to eat versus to make. Last meal.
David, what's your last meal these days?
If it was my last meal, oh man, that's a ridiculous question.
There you go.
One of your last meal. What do you want tonight? If you had 6 more beers, what would you want?
I'll change the question. The next time, it could be a while, but the next time the Washington Redskins win the Super Bowl,
okay,
what will your meal be after that game?
Wow, that's a good one now.
Thank you. No. Thank you. I don't think you'll have a chance to experience that this year, but...
True, very true.
Sorry about that.
I'd probably just gorge myself in San Sebastian somewhere. There's so many great places to eat. Mugarit's.
Would it be more fun to, in that moment of celebration, whatever the occasion, is it more fun to make the meal or to eat the meal?
I'd rather eat.
Wait a minute, the Washington Redskins just won?
Yeah.
You're going to San Sebastian?
I'd still go to San Sebastian.
I'm such a fucking liar. You're getting a box of Popeye's fried chicken, a case of beer, and so am I.
But you'd get the mac and cheese.
Yeah, yes, it's true.
Okay, this is...
But I'll tell you this, if I had to go eat, I think we both agreed, if we had to go one place to just pig out before we, you get the bad chest x-ray, you got one place to go, San Sebastian would be a really good choice, right?
There's some magical things happening there.
I'm sure that advertisement will be on their website immediately. If you're about to buy it, come here. Mr. Bourdain, there you go. Are you a good dancer? And if so, Or if not, would you please demonstrate?
He's got cowboy boots on.
No, I've been asked 2 years in a row to be on Dancing with the Stars. Now, there's a reason for that. Actually, something I learned from a friend of mine is,
Please do it.
no, that ain't never happened. No karaoke either.
I got a 5 here, and I'm sure we could get some more. How about a 5 for the Vietnamese pole dance right here?
5?
Yeah.
Tucker. Somebody told me a very interesting story that when your daughter, as a father, I took this to heart, that if when your daughter reaches the eye-rolling stage, Dad, that really the nuclear option to control your wayward daughter is threaten to dance in front of them. And if they're really being bad, you say, young lady, you're going to take that dress off, or Daddy will dance in front of your friends.
Dance
Nobody wants to see
in
that.
front.
I think there should be first of all, there should be an
daughter.
age cutoff for dancing anyway. I don't know what it would be, but after a certain point, no one should be permitted to rock.
So I was watching that episode today from Vietnam, where after a couple of cocktails, you were asked to join in and do the Vietnamese pole dance.
Yeah. I look like a gut-shot gazelle.
Worked.
Thanks for bringing that up, by the way.
It was good. Since children usually grow up to do the opposite of their parents, what are you going to do when your daughter becomes a vegetarian?
I will cook bacon around her every day until she comes around.
Okay.
That would never happen. She's Italian. It's unthinkable.
For both of you, what's your favorite hidden gem restaurant in New York City? And
I'm not telling her, you.
I will tell because I want people to support it. I think, and oddly enough, it is vegetarian, but it's shocking. No, it's Kajitsu. It's in the East Village, and I think that the summer bounty has really let the chef shine there, and it's Shojin cuisine, so it's very high technique. It's thousands of years of Japanese history behind it, and I think he's doing a very interesting take on Japanese food through, obviously it has to be vegetables, but through the guise of home-style Japanese cooking. I mean, it seems it's just really good. So you should go there.
The lamb noodle place in the Golden Mall out in Flushing, Xi'an Noodles. I think they have one here that's pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Does Italy fill you with dread and loathing?
Okay.
Or sweetness and light?
Okay. I don't want to get hyperbolic here, and not that I never do that. I went in there. First of all, it's interesting to note that even the snarkiest, most evil, Batali-hating bloggers in the world go in there and just completely freak. I went in there, my wife's Italian, and any Italian market we go to in New York, she's looking around like, this is bullshit, It's like, that's good, but this is crap. We went into Italy, and she's standing there stuttering, looking around, saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's pretty much the way I felt. I understand they closed a few days ago because they ran out of stuff. I mean, to me, it is, I think it's like the greatest thing that ever happened in the history of the universe, pretty much. I mean, it was a horror show to walk into. There were 100 people lined up on one side, 100 on the other, everywhere. But for me, the biggest problem is I walk in, it's like, oh man, that gelato looks really good. A raw meat bar. Oh, vegetables and wine. Incredible bread. Oh, which one of these 100 amazing olive oils am I going to get? It's the most grandiose, bizarro, yet another seemingly doomed, completely crazed, hubristic Batali project that ends up being the greatest thing ever. I think it's fair to say I love it, and they're delivering in a month anywhere in New York. Holy fuck! I mean, I just say the quality of my life has improved enormously. Okay. So you like it?
I haven't been. I saw it during construction, but I've only heard good things. I have a few friends working there, and what Joe and Mario do always seems to work out. So.
When I went in there, Dave Pasternak's opening Oysters, and some old lady is saying, like, where's the burrata? And I hear a voice behind her saying, second shelf to the left. Man, it was Mario. He's walking around like a stock boy. Where he has a little laminate here. It's like.
Are there any culinary magazines around today that you actually respect? Which ones?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just Civil is pretty cool.
I don't like Civil War. You like
I don't
Civil
read
War?
it, but I respect it. No, actually, I mean, I don't really read I don't read any of them. I just don't. I mean, I'm not I never, why would I look at pictures of food? I make pictures of food. And I don't read recipes. I don't even, I buy a lot of cookbooks, but I don't really read it. It's not about the recipes for me. It's about the story.
When you guys are away from this, understanding that your schedules now are beyond
I want to know your answer,
crazy.
though. Do you read any at all?
I don't read any. I read an obscure Spanish food magazine called Apicus that chefs from Europe and maybe 20 chefs.
How about any food-related websites, David? Do you read any of those?
Well, Mario said something really funny a couple months ago. He's like, whenever I'm feeling too good about myself, I just go onto the internet. So.
When you guys are away from this, first of all, can you get away from this? Your schedules are nuts. Is there something that you do that's totally away from food? I know you're a big Redskins fan. Anything, things that we don't know about you, or you're a Civil War buff, or something like that, that really gets you away, aside from family, that gets you away from this so that you can get away from it for a little while.
Civil War reenacting. I'm just trying.
He's really into this.
Yeah.
He is.
Really?
Civil War. No. Yeah.
Robert E. Lee, right?
I like Robert. Well, I'm from Virginia, and you don't know, yes, Korean in Virginia, but it's like you think that you grew up and you read that like Robert E. Lee's like the greatest person ever created, and then lo and behold, you're like, oh, that's just the Virginia textbooks.
What do you do for like? Do you have a hobby?
I do like to fly fish, and it's the only thing that I can call a hobby that I try to get better at and that I enjoy. But other than that, is drinking a hobby?
It's a profession, my friend. For me, it's a perfect vacation. I'll have a big stack of to-be-read books. I like nonfiction, but I read a fair amount of fiction.
What's on the night table right now?
I've got The Franzen book is next. Yeah. And I go on film jags. Like if I see one movie by a director. I mean, that's very much part of we like ripping off directors for their looks. For me, good cinematography is pure porn. So if I see a film that's got a really amazing look to it, chances are we'll rip it off of the show. But I go on jags. So like I'm on a Wong Kar-wai jag now because. I saw one film and it was like, oh my God, this is awesome. I have to see every single one, and then I move on to his cinematographer, like every film that he worked on. So yeah, I'm a film wonk.
David, this guy stole my question. David, what is the story with the vintage John McEnroe poster at Sambar? And there are more than a few pieces of McEnroe memorabilia in your places.
For whatever reason, I had a good friend in college, and he had this massive poster of John McEnroe in his room all of a sudden, and I was like, wow, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's like, because I love John McEnroe. Besides him being a great player, it was like his ability to yell was just nobody can even match that. I mean, I think I read the recent New York Magazine article. He still yells at his brother. It's amazing. long story cut short, friend's older brother was got married, moving to Europe. This was his prized possession. He literally stole it off the side of a building in 1984 in New York City. And the wife was like, this is staying in America. Got passed to my friend, and I asked him when we opened up Sambar, and literally that was the only thing that we had planned out. When we opened up Sambar, I was like, this little space I was like, this is perfect for the John McEnroe. So I immediately called. I didn't care about the food, anything else. I was like, wow, we could showcase this amazing photo of John McEnroe.
That's 2 stars right there, my friend. You went to meet Mr. McEnroe, right? His father. Right?
I did. I got a call from him, and I thought I was going to get in trouble because we had the photo. And again, long story cut short, he's still a practicing lawyer, and went to his office, and I basically cleaned his office for about 4 hours, and he gave me a whole box load of John's John McEnroe memorabilia. But he was just like, he's such a great father. He was like, as much as I love John, you could tell that he loves Patrick just as much. So that's how I got all this great stuff.
Any of them shown up at the restaurants yet?
Not that I know of. I wouldn't.
know.
I would know. If John McEnroe showed up, he'd probably be mad that there's a photo of John McEnroe.
Don't comp him though. Don't comp him.
No, definitely not.
All right, Chef Chang. People used to say about Lehman and Bear Stearns that they were, quote, too big to fail. How do you feel about these chefs' restaurants restaurateurs that expand all over the place, like Vegas? P.S. Don't do it.
Well, this addresses, I think, a topic that Tony can talk about as well. I think it's very important right now in America. The chef-driven restaurant has proven economically it doesn't work anymore. And if a restaurant like Crew and Shea Galante and Robert Bohr, arguably one of the most talented chefs and America's greatest sommelier, it doesn't work. The food was fantastic. It produced fantastic cooks. You have a generation of chefs, say 35 to say 42, 43 years old, that don't have restaurants anymore, partly because it just doesn't make money. Mm-hmm. And as you get larger, you sort of have to feed this beast. I don't want to get bigger. I have enough headaches, but it's like all of a sudden, a lot of the guys that I've worked with, because it's not a singular effort, they're 29, 30, they're having families. They need to make more money. Mm-hmm. We've become something that we have to support them, and we're their means of support. So I'm not going to say no to an opportunity that's going to make somebody more money. Not just myself, but mm-hmm. for other people in the company as well. And I think that's why you see a lot of restaurant groups getting larger and larger. But I do feel that there's a breaking point, and I think that it has affected negatively the New York restaurant scene. I think that people eat better as a whole, but I think that creativity is dying. So
I think some people are good at expanding. Some people are great at expanding. Mm-hmm. Some people, the more they expand, it's good for the world. Others, it is an unusual thing. Most times chefs get into the business, particularly of a certain generation, because they sense something in themselves, an inability to communicate with normal people, a discomfort with a straight job, the fact that a lot of chefs have problems reading. It's not a function of education. Dyslexia among chefs is very, very high. Mm-hmm. Simply put, a lot of very talented cooks and even very talented leader managers of people who can create a space and run a single kitchen brilliantly are not good business people. It's sort of antithetical to what got them in the business in the first place. So it shouldn't be a surprise that some people are really good at it. I think Mario is obviously really good at it. Here's a guy who picks his partners. He understands the nature of, it's not just about me, it's I'm going to build a place around a person with a vision either similar to mine or slightly different than mine. There are people who can replicate. There are people like Danny Meyer. You know, I don't think Danny Meyer is too big to fail. He's just going to get more and more successful. I think there are some people who they ran shit shows then, and they run a lot of shit shows now.
But I'm sorry, it's misunderstood though too, because as a cook, I work for Jean-Georges, I work for Tom, I work for Danielle, and as a cook, I was like, what are these fucking guys doing, man? Like, you know, they're not running the pass, they're all over the place, and if I was a cook working for myself, I'd be saying the same thing. What the fuck is this guy doing? And now I get what they were trying to do. You're trying to keep the whole thing afloat, and it's a difficult challenge. And I know a lot of chefs. A very, very good chef friend of mine, you know, he is probably one of the most talented chefs in America, and he's having a very difficult time dealing with the success and the expectations. And in fact, he just is out of the game altogether. And it's just a sad fact, but Tony said it exactly. He has a learning disability. He doesn't speak in public. And all these things are being asked of him now, and he just doesn't have not the skill set. He's not capable of it.
It's no longer enough to be a great culinary artist or craftsman. That's just not enough. If you can't describe what you do in a compelling way on the 6 o'clocks in 2 minutes,
right,
it puts you at a real disadvantage.
So at the risk of overanalyzing things, and you know, they always say that the death of comedy is trying to explain why a joke is funny, but understanding and appreciating your cynicism about the whole superstar chef thing, is it part of something else? Is it the fact that the meal has now become the thing in terms of going out? This is the thing, as opposed to, say, maybe a meal and then a night at the theater, or a night at the opera, or reading. The fact the meal has become a thing to do, does that say something about who we are, or are we looking too much into that?
It can only be a good thing. We're catching up with the European, Asian tradition. I mean, this is a birthright in most of Asia, and always has been one in Europe. What do? You get together with friends and family regularly, and you eat, and you talk about what you just ate last week and what you're about to eat next week while you're eating. I mean, that's normal, and you have some understanding of what's on your plate, and you're highly critical if it doesn't live up to your expectations. You know, seasonal, regional. You know, Wiley said that wonderful thing, farm to table.
What the fuck is that?
I buy my food on a farm and I serve it on a table. I don't need a fucking T-shirt to brag about it. This is the whole rest of the world, and much of the rest of the world thinks this way. So I think we're just catching up. You know, there are excesses. We look silly at times doing it. We say silly things while we do it. But I think in general, the more we eat, and the more we appreciate food, the more we think about it, the more we talk about it, for all of the silliness that comes with that, it's well, in balance, a good thing.
Question from the audience. Talk about the present state of hamburger.
What do you think? You like hamburgers?
I do, but I call it the staff mealization of America. These restaurants that are opening up, and it's great. I love Shake Shack. Everyone loves Shake Shack. Everyone loves In-N-Out. But, you know, we don't need every restaurant to be a Shake Shack. Or, you know, we don't need a hamburger on every menu.
We don't need more hamburgers.
No more hamburgers. No more steakhouses.
Right.
You know.
I'd agree with that.
And, I mean, getting back to the comment, I got the fig comment. I hate that stupid comment. Got taken out of context, but it's all about, we have, you know, why don't we celebrate diversity? Like, the hamburger is synonymous, it's great, it's delicious, everyone loves it. But if everyone starts to open up hamburger restaurants, what happens to everything else? The chef-driven restaurants get marginalized, and we lose the ability to, again, be creative, to have, you know, variety of ways of eating.
And then, as I always like to bring up, you know, there's the sustainability issue. You know, very important. I mean, it's what's killing us is, our voracious, hunger for cheap ground meat is, I'm told, not a good thing. I do think, I would like to see honestly, I would like to see some people go to jail over how we make ground meat in our country.
That's a fact.
I think there's a basic retool. When I read that Times article, that they are soaking meat in ammonia, that just seems wrong to me. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that's just unpatriotic. You should be able. I should be able to eat my burger medium fucking rare anywhere I go, anywhere. If you're serving a hamburger, I should be able to order it rare or medium rare. I don't want to be told that I'm sorry, that's not safe. We have to cook the living shit out of it to make it safe for you to eat. Well, is it food or is it medical waste? And
When we've spoken about this, though, it's a moral dilemma. These factory farms are atrocious and awful and should be, eradicated. But at the same time, it's an inefficient way of feeding people. But I have a hard time trying to explain to a cook, let alone someone that has a tight budget, buy this chicken. It supports a really great farmer instead of here, buy 6 chickens for the same price.
Right. I'm not saying what I'm definitely, you're right. It is a moral dilemma because I'm very much against, people say, well, we should all pay more for food. That's a tough argument to make, and it's not one I'm comfortable making. I'm just, I think perhaps the proportion, I sneer at vegetarians, but you said something very smart a while back. Maybe eating less meat, expecting less meat on the plate would not be an altogether bad thing. I think that we have a distorted expectation of how much animal protein we should have in our daily diet. I can see, anything that moves towards the Asian model, as you suggested, would probably be good for our health. But more importantly, it might really be good for cooks as well.
Right. But I think the only way we're going to get to that model is some bad times for America.
Right.
And
how do you mean?
Most countries have a food culture. We have always been a country of abundance, except for the Great Depression. But we don't have a food culture. Maybe the South, but that's about it. And people don't learn how to deal with scraps. I really have to tell cooks, don't throw away that end piece. Make something with that scrap.
Yeah, but what's happening now is that in order to eat scraps, you got to pay $32 a plate for it these days, because the only people who know how to cook scraps, or the only people who are willing to eat scraps are rich people in fine dining restaurants.
And how do we teach that and how do we inject that into the rest of the culture?
The poor run away from that as fast as they can for understandable reasons. Mm-hmm. We've lost touch with that whole era. You look at turn of the century menus in America. There's a whole other world of a wonderland of ox hearts and pigtails and
that's eating
and all of that good stuff. But it's going to be tough. I think personally it'll take hard times and a concerted campaign to just scare the shit out of people.
There's just no way McDonald's is going to be able to keep $1 hamburger on the menu. They've had $1 hamburger on the menu for 20 years. How is that possible? Mm-hmm. And I think that, Americans, we're like that, we're complacent in the last-minute student.
I think the only way out is you terrorize people away from McDonald's on one hand using every nasty propagandic, like FBI used to run a COINTELPRO program to, bust up the left and destroy the Panthers back in the day. And it was a very, morally questionable, to say the least, but effective program. They using propaganda, dirty tricks, they terrorized people, set them against each other, divided and destroyed. I would suggest that on one hand, and then and seduce on the other, meaning people providing cheap cheap, and delicious alternatives when possible. And this is why I look to the Asian style or South American style hawker or food stall, the food truck, as maybe offering a possibility of.
Singapore and New York City.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
A couple more. We have time for a couple more. New York City has changed in the past 30 years. That is gentrified. Are there any neighborhoods you feel still represent the older, grittier New York? Any areas outside New York, or is New York lost forever? Well, thank you and good night.
Do I have to be the dark, gloomy one?
No, you don't have to be the dark one.
I just
Yeah, pretty much.
Again, going back to Schefter and restaurants, these are the restaurants that make New York. I don't know what the statistic is, but I'm not a native New Yorker. I came here because I was tired of the suburbs. I was tired of strip malls and the homogenization of everything. That's why I came to New York, because it was different. And I think that, people, to tell people that, hey, go get this lamb soup in Flushing, it's going to be delicious. People are like, how the hell do I even get there? In a way, I'm happy because it's, for the time being, it's going to stay that way.
Right.
But all of Manhattan, for the most part now, it's the same.
Right. You're from Virginia. You grew up in New Jersey, Tony. Do you have, after the first book and then the television show, and with the success of Momofuku, do you get people from junior high who wouldn't give you the time of day, all of a sudden calling up and say, hey, how you doing? Yeah, can you get me a reservation? And do you get people from the old, you're not bothered by those people?
I left high school, that was it for me. I mean, I never went back, never looked back. No, just never came up.
And you're not hearing from these people?
I don't go back to the high school reunion, I don't do that.
I'm in the same boat.
I'm
occasionally, but
So what was it like doing
bridge-burning guy. I mean, same with college. I just keep moving. I mean, and I have this weird dysfunctional life. I suspect a lot like David. We if we want to meet for a drink, it's like, my assistant will call your assistant and we'll find someplace, 2 months down the way. So yeah, I don't. I mean, if the kid who bullied me, Joey Ranker from 3rd grade, if he pops up on the Taconic State Parkway, 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm driving and he suddenly pops up in front of my headlights, I'm running the fuck over, but I'm not stopping by to, go over old times, no.
I was looking for a headline from tonight's event. Now we got it. When was the last time you cooked, quote-unquote, family meal, and what was it? And, as an addendum, favorite candy bar?
Family meal, like for my family, I cooked calf's liver veneziana for my wife a couple of days ago, and candy bar, I don't really, yeah, I guess if I'm like stoned, Reese's peanut butter cup. Preferably frozen.
Candy bar, start first. I was introduced to the UK version of the Whopper, and it's called the Malteser, and it just destroys the Whopper. I don't know why. There's no question.
Hard to believe.
It is the Malteser. It sounds crazy, but it's true. And the last family meal I made for literally my family or staff meal.
Any family.
Well, I think I made some type of fried rice. We have a lot of rice at the restaurants, so.
Let's finish up as we're going back to something you said earlier, talking about the journey to get where you guys got. At the times, were there times where you just thought, before the books and before the show and before the restaurants, were there times where you just thought, I'm just not sure this is going to work. I don't know how I see my way to the end of this. Or did you have this feeling of, I know this is what I'm going to love to do, it's going to work out?
I still feel that way today. Where I don't know what the future is. How this is all going to work out. I have no idea. I mean, that's the reality. I just, it hasn't really changed. The scenery's changed, but the road has remained the same.
I feel, I don't feel complacent. I don't feel a sense of real accomplishment. I honestly had no plan to live past 30 when I was 30. It's not a joke.
No, it's not a
true.
joke. It's true.
I mean, I just didn't, I really bought into the 60s, early 70s ethic of live fast, die. I mean, I really believed it, you know, and I lived my life that way. And it came as a shock to me when I turned 30, and I really had to sort of kind of figure something out then. And that didn't really work out. And I found myself sort of grateful. You know, I washed up on the shores of Leal, very grateful for the fact that I had a regular job in a restaurant that was popular and actually making money, that was serving food that I was actually good at and enjoyed cooking, probably the type of food that I should have been cooking my whole career. So for me, you know, I found myself at 44. I didn't know how I was ever going to pay my rent. I didn't know how I was ever going to pay the 10 years of back taxes I owed. I didn't know how I was going to, you know, ever climb out of debt or ever afford health insurance or any of those things. I mean, I went to sleep in mortal terror every night. That changed overnight when Kitchen Confidential came out. But since that time, I think, you know, I keep moving. I try to stay interested. I try not to fuck up, you know, all the good things that have happened in a fairly frantic way that I'm sure David understands. And I try to present a moving target.
Well, it's no hype. I've done about 200 of these profiles since 2003 and tons and tons and tons of interviews. And the times spent with the two of you are second to none, among the most compelling when it comes to interesting New Yorkers. And again, going through the newsroom and saying, we're going to talk to David Chang, and people just stopped and looked at me and said, no, you have to understand. You have to understand. And it was a look, it was a beautiful look, because it's the great look of when people can marry food to a great event and a family event or an event with friends. And to me, the proof's in the pudding. The book, to me, the books have made us look at food and restaurants in a different way. And with the television show, I mean, in our lives, who's getting up and going to Thailand or to Burma or to Vietnam tomorrow? But we sit down and we watch, and you take us there in an interesting way, again, that connects the food to the culture. And there's a tremendous, that's a beautiful thing. And that's a great
trying
meal.
to have a good time.
And a great meal is a beautiful thing, too. And for tonight, we all thank you.
Thank you, guys.